Hi everybody, it's Andy here, and I've got Rich, Embers, and John on the line with us. Hi guys, how you doing?
Hi.
Not bad.
Yep.
What tea? Yeah.
Nice cup
Hey.
of tea with the British atheists. Anyway, today we're going to look at a subject which is it's quite worrying, quite contentious. There's a lot of things going on in this, and it gets quite deep. And but there's been a report out today, which is on all the major news networks, about a report that finds child sexual abuse prevalent in institutions across the religious institutions across the major UK religions. And it came out on Thursday, and so it's a very, very topical thing. So we thought we'd have a conversation about it, and we've spoken about this prior to the podcast. And there's a lot of sexual abuse goes on in lots of different institutions, and I just want Ember to sort of just give us a bit of a caveat about the way we're going to talk about this, because it is quite sensitive and it's not something which we want to take lightly in any way. So Ember, do you want to just quickly give us a bit of a caveat about how we're going to structure this?
Yeah, thanks, Andy. The way we should structure this is to link everything to atheism. The report that came out today says 11% of child abuse takes place in church or religious settings. The caveat I will put in is that most child abuse happens in the home, and it's with people that children know and trust. So we can link that to religion, because children go to churches, they inquires and all sorts of things like that, and their parents trust clergy, priests, whatever. So we have to be very careful, where the boundaries are that we're discussing this. But this happens in religious institutions, but the big problem is that it's never talked about or it's protected.
Yeah, that's exactly what I'm thinking. It's because we know that paedophilia can happen in any situation. Humans are humans; they do what they do. And the church per se is not to blame for their actions. It's not about that. This is not the focus that I want to go on, or I don't think we want to go on. It's not about that. My biggest issue has always been with all these sexual abuses, which is, it's been widely reported over the years and substantiated. People have gone to prison for it. Is really the concept that the church, who spout moral integrity, and whenever we speak to theists in discussions, and we talked about the sort of conversations we have with theists, one of the questions that are asked very, very often is, where do you get your morals from? If you're an atheist, where do you get your morals from? And the thing that's really sort of struck me more than anything else, and I'm sort of quite passionate about, is the church protects these paedophiles, and they've been protecting them for decades and decades and decades. I mean, we know that there's been a lot of reports over the years of, not just in the Catholic Church, but throughout different religions. It's a place where people are trusted, and if paedophiles get into those sort of situations, it's sort of a good place for them to hide. My problem, more than anything else, is the way the Catholic Church, primarily through the reports we've had, protect those paedophile priests.
And to be fair, it's not just the Catholic Church either. There's
tremendous abuse that's gone on within the Jehovah's Witness, which has come out. There was a very recent report of a Church of England bishop who protected a Church of England paedophile priest. It happens everywhere. And I think for me, it's the hypocrisy of the religious institutions rather than the actual individual paedophiles themselves. That really gets me. I mean, it's the fact that, and even now, people still trust the clergy with their children without question. And I find that just absolutely amazing and appalling. It's the fact that these religious institutions define themselves by being the sources of morality and moral purpose and teaching right from wrong and protecting the innocent, when all they've done is actually move around, cover up, and enable these priests. It's that particular hypocrisy that really, really angers me.
Rich, this is not really a joke, but it sort of is a joke that I sort of used to assassinate people as trustworthy. I just say, would you want this person to be a babysitter for you?
Yeah.
And so these are the big issue for me as well, because I know some priests and they are good people. They may be misguided in the way I feel about the world and the way they feel about them. We have fantastic discussions about philosophy, primarily around the belief in God. And I have no problem with trusting anybody with them. I have no problem at all. That they're good human beings.
But that's them as individuals that you know.
That's the thing. And I think that the big issue for me has not been the individual priests. Yes, they should go to prison for their crimes and
absolutely
that sort of thing. Just like every other human being on the planet who does exactly the same thing should go to prison for their crimes. My issue is with the church, and religious institutions more than anything else that cover up these crimes, and because of their cover up that's been going on for decades and decades and decades, because of that initial cover up, because they don't want to hurt the church, they don't want to hurt the image of the church, they just move these priests. I'm doing a lot of sort of background on the Catholic Church scandal, because that's one of the things that has been come out in this report that came out on Thursday. But this has been going on for a long, long time, and it's the cover up by bishops, which I think is morally bankrupt. And this is a completely different concept from do you believe in God or not. We call this an atheist podcast, and I get that this may not be hitting right on the button of atheism. However, these are the people who stand in front of us when we're having philosophical discussions about the existence of God and our belief systems, and ask us where we get our morals from. And there are institutions, church institutions, that are still at this moment doing exactly what they've always done by covering this up. And that, to me, is morally bankrupt.
Well, and it gets worse. It gets worse than that. I mean, years, as you say, this has been going on for years and years and years and years. And, a number of different churches have said, right, we're going to deal with this. We're going to deal with this. We are going to deal with this properly. We're going to bring in the authorities, etc., etc. And then they don't do it. They say they're going to do it, and they're constantly saying they're going to do it. And it's only until they're backed up into a corner with literally nowhere else to turn do they actually do it. But they still do it reluctantly. They still resist. they still refuse to hand over things like documentation that they have held on their own paedophile priests. You know, their fear of reputational damage is absolutely disgraceful. I mean, if one of us, God forbid, was found to be committing these sorts of offences, I would be the first person on the phone to the police reporting them for it and reporting on every conversation that I'd ever have with them. You know, for the benefit of the tape, I am an ex-police officer who has dealt with paedophiles only on a couple of occasions. You know, and I've actually arrested a couple. You know, before I left the police, and of course, you know, one has to deal with it in a very professional manner when one's doing that. But I've got no time for people that cover up these individuals, because as far as I'm concerned, actually the cover up is worse than the crime, because the cover up enables it.
This is my point more than anything else. The cover up over the decades that this has been happening has enabled these priests to abuse more children. You know, they call it the geographic solution, and this is what the people in the hierarchy of the church do. And this has been documented. You know, we can put as many links as we possibly can. I'll find more stuff, more evidence, really to substantiate some of the things I'm talking about. But it's well known in this that the hierarchy of the church, going up to the diocese, the bishops, who sort of are the lords of that area, know about these paedophile priests. They know about what happens, you know, with child abusers and things like that. I mean, and other misdemeanors and other crimes and stuff. But with this, it's particularly sort of, it hurts a lot, that sort of thing. But they know about these things. They decide not to get onto the phone to the police and report that. They decide not to do that because the church is more important than the lives of those children. And I mean, I get emotional when I'm talking about this, and I get very fired up when I talk about this, only because it's disgusting what they do, you know. And as you say, pedophiles will be pedophiles. They'll find their home, and the church can be a home like any other institution, you know. But it's my biggest problem is the cover up that the church does enables those people and people like that to make it their home, knowing that they are not going to go to prison, or believing they're not going to go to prison. They're not going to get caught. If they get caught, they'll be moved on. And they do call it this geographic solution, where if they're found out or they're suspected, which is the word they use, they're suspected. It's not proven. They're only suspected. In other words, they know because they've been told. Then they move them to a different town. If they get found out in that town, they move them to a different country. If they're found in that country, they move them to a different continent, which is normally Africa or South America. And then those countries get abused as well.
Yeah, and when they get found out there, they're moved into the Vatican for non-pastoral duties.
Yeah, it's to me that is immoral. It's unforgivable. And if they want to talk about sin, which they love to talk about, that's sin, as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, well, we'll talk about sin when we do our future podcast on the Alpha course.
Another throw forward.
Absolutely going to be brilliant.
I think that the church, particularly the Roman Catholic Church, are complicit in this because they set themselves up as an alternative family. They're trying to give off an aura of nurturing, parental care. I mean, take, for example, the priest. What's he called? Father. And then, believe it or not, there's the Mother Superior, isn't there? They are deliberately setting themselves up as people you can let your children go to. So if it's a trap, it's unsurprising. And the reason that they have their cover-ups is because they actually have an alternative jurisdiction. They don't just have the law system that Rich has been enforcing when he was active.
And Embers.
Yeah,
We
yeah,
both,
and
we both
Embers.
did.
Yeah, yeah. They have the church's own law system, and they think that that's more important. The grace of God superpositions the laws of the country in their view. So this is close to being criminal in my mind.
I think it's more than close. I think it.
No, I think it is criminal. I think it is criminal.
Okay. Yeah, setting themselves up as an alternative jurisdiction shouldn't be allowed, basically. But it isn't just the UK. I mean, I know we're Atheism UK, but these incidents happen all over the place. There was the famous case with Archbishop Pell, George Pell, the Australian, who, like Andy said, he got promoted to the Vatican, where he was made in charge of the Pope's accounts or something. But then he was extradited back to Australia. Although I think the latest on that account, on that case, is that his appeal was successul.
Yeah.
It was, yes. The conviction was quashed.
His fiction was quashed.
Yeah, yeah. But and it's not just the Roman Catholic Church, although this week the Vatican sanctioned a retired Polish archbishop for covering up child sex abuse. And on the same subject, a retired vicar here who was able to work right up until 2010 in churches had been convicted of sexually abusing children 25 years before, and he was still allowed to work in churches.
Actually, I've got a question for you, John. Going back to the one before the Church of England bishop, the priest that got the bishop that got sanctioned by the church.
Yeah.
What was the sanction?
The sanction was he was banned. His name is Golubiewski, and he was banned from public services and ordered to donate to a Catholic foundation for the protection of minors.
I'll teach him.
Yeah. He was accused of covering up child sex abuse in Wrocław, and the case against him, he's 83, and it's just the latest in the sexual abuse scandal of the Catholic Church in Poland.
And that's one of the other things. When the church does finally relent, they always relent when it's priests that are either so old any punishment isn't going to make any difference anyway, or they've already died.
Yeah.
So at which point, again, what's that actually going to do?
Yeah.
Yeah. And again, just other examples. I know that so in the States there was a big problem within the Baptist Church with abuse. Although one of the things I will say there is the church was a little bit more proactive in getting rid of people, but the Baptist Church in America is not as hierarchical as say the Roman Catholic Church or the Jehovah's Witnesses or people like that. And looking at the information on the report, I know I mentioned them earlier, but the Jehovah's Witnesses are also singled out a little bit in terms of their cover-ups, in their pressure on preventing the victims from speaking out because of the concept of sexual purity, social familial standing, and again, the defense of the church. And in fact, there was one person who was a former elder of the Jehovah's Witnesses, actually said that the inquiry probably understated the level of abuse within the JWs. And that part of the problem was that the inquiry itself was underfunded. So, I mean, bearing in mind they were still singled out, calling out these particular religions, denominations or cults, whatever you want to call them, and it's just unacceptable. It's just unacceptable the way that these institutions treat the victims, and it's unforgivable the shielding of the abusers.
Yeah, well, you're right.
Yeah, but bear in mind, Andy, your original premise with this, that sexual abuse is going on in all sorts of religious denominations or cults, and I dare say most of it is in Islam.
Well, in the report, it actually states a number of different religions, including Islam, Jehovah's Witnesses, Church of England, Catholic Church. List goes on, and it will do. It isn't down to one church or one faith or whatever. These are obviously organizations, and within any organization you get different types of people, and some people are going to be criminal, and so it's not down to one something. I think the Catholic Church has been hit the hardest because it's a big church. There's lots of people in there, and there's just looking at some of the figures, there are thousands and thousands and thousands of people who have come forward as being abused, and there's quite a few thousand priests that have been taken off from being priests, have been kicked out of the church because of this. There's been lots of people who are within the church who have been convicted. So just by sheer number, the Catholic Church is probably going to get it more than anything else. This will happen in any institution, as you say, Embers. And again, I'm just going to reiterate that the point for me is more that the religious organizations cover these things up, and the Catholic Church has a massive organizational structure, and
still massive amounts of power as well. Don't forget that.
This goes up to the Pope. I mean, let's not, the Pope knows about these things. And if you think about what the Pope is, he can put out a dictate and tell people exactly how to behave. And I don't see, things changing anytime soon. The Pope is apparently all powerful within the church. But we still have bishops covering up, the local bishops covering up paedophile priests and child abusers. They have done it regularly. This is not something which has happened just recently. It's one of the first in America. The big thing in America sort of came out around about sort of 2001, 2002.
The Boston Globe inquiry.
Globe inquiry. Yeah. And that showed, I mean, just the indication of just that very first big incident showed the cover up, the level of the cover up, and how far it went up. And
this is a centuries old problem. I am absolutely sure of it.
Sure, yeah, absolutely.
And it's only in recent years that the welfare of children has actually been something of importance to wider society.
And also the ability to report as well.
Yeah.
And people taking them seriously, because I grew up in the 60s and 70s, and it's a different world now. I mean, just things like rape victims were never taken seriously in the 70s, just never taken seriously by the police, and that's again.
There are still issues around that today,
and there's still issues around that today, but it's a lot better than it was.
It's a lot better than it was, yes.
And the reporting of these crimes is a lot better. More there's you've got SNAP in the USA, which is an organisation that supports people have been abused by
It's Survivors Network of those abused by priests. I believe is what it's called.
And they have a convention every year, and they have a support network, and they are still to this day getting reports. I mean, nothing's stopped. It's just that it's easier to report now. So, right from the beginning of this century, it's become a lot easier to report these things. So anything in the last century, anything in sort of the 90s, the 80s, the 70s, the 60s, the 50s, you go back as far as you like, those things would never have been reported. No. And if they had been reported, those victims would have been shamed. Yeah. I saw a documentary with a young girl who had been abused, and she was saying that she felt it was her fault that she led the priest astray. Yeah. And that would have been enforced on her.
Yeah, and in some cases, as the report shows, that is still happening today.
Yeah, it will happen, and it'll always happen. I mean, this crap will always be going on.
That's the motivation behind putting women in burqas, so they don't lead men astray, as if men have no control.
Yeah.
Anyway, you'll be pleased, Rich, to know that you're right about the age, because the retired vicar who was jailed for sexually abusing children he's 80 and he's been locked up for 4 years. So he should be out of it for good, I would say. And that happened in Kent.
But anyway, look, I think we can draw this one.
Well, I got a big question then, actually.
Okay, yeah, go on.
Before we do draw this to a close, and this is a big one. Now, this report is going to be laid before Parliament later on this year. So the question is, and I'm going to use the royal we here, what do we do about this? What can we do about it? What should we do about it?
Petition.
What are we going to do that's actually going to have an impact?
Well, this is something which I think we do need to seriously think about. I don't think we're going to come up with answers.
All right, let me rephrase that. Let me rephrase that. This report goes to Parliament in later on in the year. What should Parliament be doing about this?
I'll just jump in there. How do people know about this report? How do they get access to it?
Well, it's published by an organisation called. It's actually an official inquiry. It's the Independent Inquiry into Child Sexual Abuse. It has its own. I think it has its own website. I think, but it's an actual formal official independent inquiry. It will be laying its business before Parliament. But what I suppose we could do is we can continue to monitor this report, and we can post updates as to what's going on our own website. We can link to it from there. So those of you, you're all online, because if you weren't, you wouldn't be able to watch this. So if you go to our website, atheismuk.com, I thought, because we haven't actually plugged our website properly yet on this podcast. So go to atheismuk.com, and we can start building some content around this inquiry, and we'll keep our ear to the ground, and people can follow it either from there or from the links that we can post.
I think it's a good idea. Yeah,
absolutely.
Okay, as long as it's linked to atheism, because this is a huge subject.
Yes,
yeah, it is a huge subject. Yeah,
there is an item of good news, though, isn't there? I mean, there's a big exodus from the Roman Catholic Church in Ireland, and it's partly stimulated by this paedophile priest nonsense, which, this horrifying, heinous activity that they've got up to. But finally, people watching this who have experienced this sort of sexual abuse as children, there's Recovering from Religion. That's an organization which does counseling to help those suffering from religious trauma. There is such a thing, religious trauma.
Recovering from Religion, which was founded by a friend of our organization, Dr. Darrell Ray, who's over in the States, but he's a friend of ours. it'd be nice to actually get him on to the podcast to talk about it. Actually, that might be something
definitely.
for
He's a
our
lovely
future.
guy.
He's a lovely guy.
He's brilliant. He is.
I interviewed him last year, and
Yeah.
that video is on my site. We could put it on the AUK channel.
Yeah, I've interviewed him as well, and it was a very interesting conversation because there's some very deep psychological things that he talks about.
Yeah. And he is himself a psychologist.
Yeah.
And he is
I think that's a good thing to do, and we'll put the link to them below this.
Daryl, if you're watching, we'll be in touch.
Yes. But I think that's about all we've got time for today. Let's wrap that up. If you've got any comments, any questions on any of the things we've been talking about today, then definitely put a comment below. If you want to contact us as well, you can contact us on our website. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel as well, and just down there somewhere. So we'll see you all next week, and ask us the questions. We'll answer them. If you've got any comments specifically about what we've been talking about today, because it is very emotive, this, and just put some comments below, and we'll cover all of those. So thanks very much for joining us, and we'll see you next time.
See you
Bye.
soon.
See you later.
Bye-bye.
Well, thanks for joining us today, and don't forget to click that like button. Also, make a comment, and of course, subscribe to the channel. We'll see you next time.